Iowa State 24, Kansas State 21. It was a slugfest of a game where Iowa State and the Cyclones, I would say, outcoached and out-physicaled and mentally pummeled the Kansas State Wildcats. They covered the 3-point spread in favor of Kansas State, and I got the game wrong. I predicted, that Kansas State would win, but that it would be very close. And where I am going to give myself credit in this pick is I still think after this game that Kansas State is the more talented team. I honestly think that way. When I looked at how Kansas State was able to generate some explosives in a way that Iowa State just quite frankly could not, that's what I mean when I say Kansas State was more talented. I think Kansas State's receivers were better. I think that their running backs were comparable. I think that Avery Johnson showed moments of talent that Rocco Becht just does not have. But just because you're more talented, just because you're favored, just because you should win, does not mean you win. It means nothing, actually. To a certain degree, it starts to mean something, but it's not like Kansas State was Georgia and Iowa State was Middle Tennessee State or UC Chattanooga. That's not what this was. What this was two Big 12 teams who are very comparable in talent, very comparable in coaching, two coaches that develop well, that are physical, play a similar brand of football, punch above their weight class, and it's a rivalry, so that implies a very close game. Before we resume this segment, please take a few seconds of your time to make sure you have liked the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell for the channel and for any team podcasts and playlists linked in the description, and also comment your thoughts down below in the comment section and join my Discord server via the description. All of those things I just asked you to do are completely free, and they sign you up for things related to my channel, or they don't sign you up for anything. No cost to you, and all the benefit to you because we release daily college football content here on College Football with Sam. If you want to support the channel monetarily, sign up for a YouTube membership or check any other links in the description for my merchandise store and Patreon page. Thank you very much, and let's get back to the segment. And what was this? It was a close game. It's why Iowa State won 24-21, 3-point game. Iowa State controlled the clock with around 34 minutes of possession. They ran 74 plays to Kansas State's 57, so 17 more plays. And something that caught my attention early in this matchup was that while Kansas State was able to run the ball better initially in terms of yards per carry, what I noticed in the first quarter was Iowa State's offensive line was doing a much better job getting their feet across the line of scrimmage than Kansas State's were. Kansas State was running better because their running backs were faster and their quarterback was much more mobile. And they were able to create explosives on the outside because they had better athletes. Iowa State was able to run the ball when they did, especially later in the game, because they were larger on the offensive line, because their offensive line, I think, straight up was just better in run blocking. And they were able to stick to their identity, and they tired out Kansas State's defensive front. I mean, Kansas State's defensive front owned Iowa State with stunts, with blitzes, sometimes only sending 4. They owned them with pressure. They got 4 sacks. They recovered a fumble via a sack, and they dominated Iowa State, I would say, in terms of pass rush versus pass pro, and really broke even with them, I think, in straight-up pass defense and coverage versus Iowa State's wide receivers and quarterback. Becht only completed 50% of his passes, but he had some two really good throws for touchdowns and a few others that were particularly clutch. His pocket mobility was chef's kiss supreme. It was incredible. 6.5 yards per attempt for Iowa State through the air, 9.1 for Kansas State, 4.7 per carry for Kansas State, 3.9 for Iowa State on the ground. This is sack adjusted, so I took the sacks out of this because I think that counting sacks against what running backs do is particularly stupid. Another intriguing thing to think about is Kansas State only allowed 1 sack, so they were much better in pass pro than Iowa State was. But Kansas State only had success in 25% of their power running plays, which means when it's 2 yards to the first down marker or short, can you pick up the first down? Iowa State had 38% success there. That's something I wanted to point out there as kind of a critical game stat that ultimately decided it. That is why, outside of some commitment by Iowa State to trick plays, and since they were running late in the game, they could pass on 4th and short and ultimately convert it to close out the game. That power running was a huge part of the reason why Kansas State was 1 of 4 and tried a stupid quarterback sweep inside their own 30, and Iowa State was 3 of 3. Kansas State was more successful on 3rd down conversions, pass protection, explosive plays. They showed they were more talented, but you know what? You know what? It didn't matter. Iowa State won, and Iowa State won because they coached circles around Kansas State. Their play calling wasn't just better. I thought overall their play calling was simpler. Not as many trick plays, trickeration. You're not overthinking things. You're not as reactive. You're just sticking to what you know and trying to win. That's all. Now, they made some mistakes too. They had a fumble inside the Kansas State 5 that, gave Kansas State momentum, saved them from the muff punt from Dylan Edwards, and I hope Dylan Edwards is okay. And they had that fumble from Becht when you had that stunt Kansas State did, and they just killed Becht there. Iowa State had some very bad missed assignments, and against a team like Iowa, who I think is built a lot like Kansas State, but better in most instances, most positions, and better coached, I think that is a problem that needs to be rectified. But Iowa State won, and they get a pretty easy game in week 1 before they have to play Iowa. And most teams in the Big 12 schedule they face are not going to be as tough as Kansas State, at least from my perspective. So can they carry that momentum? And how does Kansas State bounce back? How do they do that? That is a big question. So I think Kansas State is the better team still in terms of power ratings. But Iowa State has convinced me, at least, they're a team to watch for in the Big 12. Didn't think that before. And I think that if these teams were to rematch based on what I saw yesterday, I would probably pick Iowa State to win again. Might change my mind after they play a few games, and they could always rematch in Arlington, but I would pick Iowa State to win. I just would. I think they match up well with Kansas State. And at the end of the day, while I disagree with some about Becht obviously being better than Johnson, I think that overall Iowa State's team is more clutch. They outcoached Kansas State. Both offensive lines were rough. What was encouraging about Iowa State's, though, is it got better as the game went on in both pass protection and run blocking. Kansas State's really didn't. Defenses dominated, especially up front, but the secondaries, and I think that's understandable because the quarterbacks were both competent and they have some good athletes at receiver. The secondaries were a bit here and there, especially Iowa State's, especially theirs. And these teams obviously have talent limitations too, but we knew that. And that was part of what made the game fun, is how ugly it was. It was a toxic first half. It was absolutely awful. Really fun to watch. And as I mentioned earlier, a key reaction of mine too is that Kansas State had the superior athletes. So if you're Kansas State and you go back to the drawing board and you find a way to use these guys better and to not overthink things, you can win the Big 12. And you can have the season that the power ratings and many of the preseason books who had you favored to win the Big 12, you can have that type of season. You can. So go back to the drawing board. You have a warm-up game, a tune-up game in week 1. Play that. And as for Iowa State, a fantastic coaching job by Matt Campbell, a clutch effort from Becht, and also from their running backs. I mean, their running backs, they did a really good job, I think, with their vision, seeing where the gaps were, being patient on the ground. And that offensive line, if Iowa State can get that fixed in pass blocking and they can continue to show the improvements they had in run blocking throughout the game, well, that along with health, if those things can be constant, and there's a possibility of that, I like Iowa State, and they will be in a very entertaining watch. Very excited to watch them in the Cy-Hawk game against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Thank you for watching College Football with Sam. Make sure that you've liked the video, subscribed to the channel, Hit the notification bell for the channel and team playlists and podcasts in the description. Join the free Discord server where we talk college football 24/7 and have commented your thoughts down below. Check out the description for any ways you can support the channel monetarily. Everything else I've asked you to do is completely free, and your support means the world to me. We're trying to become the next big thing on college football YouTube. 6-figure subscribers, maybe 1 million one day. I think we can do that. And also check out any videos or playlists, anything in these columns right here, where there will be videos and playlists. Yeah, you get the point. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.